Hello, welcome to Veteran Voice. My name is Larry McCullaugh. I'll be your guest again today. I've got a World War II veteran who's a pretty good buddy of mine that I met over at the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and we got to talking one night and telling some stories back and forth and all, as veterans have a tendency to do. And he interested me enough, I thought he'd be a good person to have come on the program and share some of his experiences during World War II with us. So my guest is William Hughes. Bill, how are you doing today?
Fine.
Good. I appreciate you coming out today to share your wisdom and your stories with us. I know that we got one time talked for an hour or two. I think just got you laughing so hard I thought you were going to fall down. But
Yeah.
you were in during World War II. Why don't you tell us how old you were when you went into the Army and where you took your training? Just a little bit of background on when you went in the Army.
Well, I took in 1940, I guess. Everybody 18 had to take an exam for military service.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that and passed it. And in June '41, they called me in for a year's training. And of course, I was in, and then December the 7th, I was in a movie, the Raid of Texas, and they said Pearl Harbor had been, Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor. That's the first time. It was in the afternoon, I'd say around 2 o'clock when we found out about it. But I went in, inducted in Louisville. And I went at a number 10 here in Paducah, the draft. And there's 6 of us went up to Louisville from Paducah, and I was the only one passed. All the rest of them came back, and some of them had bad eyes, they had thick glasses, and one of them was alcoholic. They turned him down. And
Can't have a drunk out there with a rifle now.
Yeah, and yeah, I remember we was getting examined, and he asked him, said, "Well, how much do you drink, or how often?" He said, "Well, I drink a pint anyway a day," and said, "Sometimes if I run out of money, well, I don't drink it, but I can get it on the credit most of the time." And that captain said to one another, and he said, "That guy's, I believe he's an alcoholic." So they sent him back.
So out of the six that went, you're the only one that they took?
Yeah, I was the only one out of the bunch who went to
goodness.
Paducah that day.
Oh, where did they send you from there then?
I went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And shipped out of there, got on the train. I didn't know where I was going, and here come a sergeant down through there, and he had all of our names, and he said, "Going to Fort Riley, Kansas, Cavalry Replacement Training Center." And he asked one old boy sitting there behind me in the train, he said, "Where are you from?" He said, he was from the Bronx. And he said, "You ever ride a horse?" And he said, "Oh, no, I never rode a horse." And he said, "Well, the Army will teach you how to ride." And he come on. He didn't like that, and so he came on to me, and I was thinking. He said, "You ever ride a horse?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I rode a horse." I said, "I raised on one on the farm. Rode them all the time." And he said, "Mechanized." That's what I wanted. I wanted a mechanized scout. And so we got to Fort Riley. Well, I got in the mechanized, and got through the basic training. I went down to Laredo, Texas. Fort McIntosh is right in about 6 blocks we'd be downtown. The post is right in the edge of town, and brigade headquarters, and the old general was there, and there's about probably 75 of us. And we had it made, right there. We'd go into town nearly every night, and so then after the bomb Pearl Harbor, they put old Mexico off of limits for a while, but we'd still go over there. Baker on the post, senior custom officer on the bridge, and of course we'd take our tie off and roll our sleeves up, and I'd look like a service try to, and he'd say, "Boy, I don't know. Y'all getting that Mexican jail?" He said, "I can't do nothing for you." He said, "You're right over there." And that guy, he'd say, "We ain't gonna get in no trouble, no." He said, "I don't know." And finally, he'd let us go. We'd call a cab, and go. We never did. We
Never got locked up
that
in there.
cab. We never got locked up or got in any trouble over there.
Well, how long did you stay there before they actually sent you overseas?
Then I went 4th of July in 42. Well, we had a 24-hour pass. Of course, we didn't know nothing about that 124th Regiment. There'd already been a couple of truckloads came by going up to Fort Clark. They were going overseas. And about a week before, and they stayed all night there at the post, and we never thought anything about it. They needed some more replacements. That fast, and we could have been probably been to Old Mexico or somewhere, but we didn't know it, that they needed some more replacements, and so me and Baker on the post, and we was down there, and they had a big dance hall and outside, beer garden and all, and right down in Laredo, right downtown, and we'd met a couple of sisters, and we were dancing. We was having a big time, and here come one of the corporal from the post, and he punched me and said, "Come on, Bill," said, "you're going overseas. You're going leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning." Said, "Come on and check your stuff in and get examined and get ready to go 4 o'clock." And she said, "Well, we'd have another dance." And I said, "Well, sure." And he was jumping up and down, "Oh, no, he can't have another dance." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I got time for another." We had another dance, and so come on back out there. And she said, "Well, you coming back if you get checked in?" And said, "I'll wait for you." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll be back in." And he said, "No, there won't be no passes," which I knew he wouldn't get no passes, but me and my buddy, we'd scale that fence all right, We'd been going out a lot, and coming in. And
Did you make it at 4 o'clock when you were supposed to?
4 o'clock a lot of times. Get in time for reveille, get up in the barracks, and they'd be reveille, and we'd fall out there. But so we came back and checked in, and we went over, all taking the physical, and some of them was about half drunk, and they didn't want to go overseas, and some of them did, and one old boy had a sore throat. He wasn't much wrong with him, and they put him in the hospital and wouldn't let him go. He was crying, and it was something else, you know. It's like, and one of them, he'd been in that before, and he'd got transferred out of this 112th, so he hit of course he was drinking pretty heavy, and he hit the captain, examining us, and he said, "You know who you hit?" And he said, "Yeah, captain." He wanted to throw him in the brig. He didn't want to go. They didn't do nothing. They sent him right on with us.
Sent him along with the rest of you.
Yeah.
Now, I guess you guys went over by ship.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
How long did it take you to get from the United States over to where did you go to?
We went to, first we went to Camp Stoneman, and they give us all the 24-hour pass into Frisco before we shipped over. And I run into one guy downtown, and he said, "You're not going overseas, are you?" He said, "I'm going over AWOL." He said, "Man, you'll never be back." He said, I said, "Oh yeah, I got a round trip ticket." He's trying to get me to go AWOL with him. No, I can do that. And I said, "I got a round trip ticket," so I went on.
And where'd
you the times it looked it looked pretty bad, but I made it.
Where did you land at when you got over there?
We landed in New Mayo, New Caledonia, at a French penal colony there that they'd exiled some from France on.
And then I know eventually you ended up in the Philippines. We talked about that.
But we landed there, and they was talking about we'd probably go to Burma or somewhere. And see, this outfit I got transferred to was a horse cab. They load their saddles and everything on the ship and went over with us. And all the equipment, you know, the saddles and all that stuff. And sure enough, they shipped horses from Australia over.
Really?
On this island, yeah, and we had them tied on a picket line, roped down by the river there, and we'd have problems with the night, you know, fall out. It wasn't any Japs right there then, but they was giving us exercise and training. They'd say the Japs landed down New Mayo Harbor. It was 9 miles, and here we'd go, you know, out there and dig in, you know, and go through all that. Truck would bring out a little sandwich and some coffee in the morning, and then we'd head back, you know, and those horses, then we'd have to cur them and feed them, and you know, and then we'd walk them around, and finally we put the saddle on them, and kept on until we finally mounted up on them, and riding them horses, and no.
So did you? And now the Philippines.
And I'd had my training at brigade headquarters there at Out of Basic, and anti-tank guns and machine guns and everything. You know, we'd take them down blindfolded and assemble them, and they had one platoon in headquarters, anti-tank. They had jeeps, and the rest of it was horses, you know. And we'd go out on the problem, and here they'd come by me in a jeep pulling those anti-tank guns, you know. What I was in, what I was trained in, and there I was walking as before we mounted the horses. And that didn't sit very good in me, you know.
They trained Trained you for mechanized, and then he gave you a saddle, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, we finally saddled up the horses, and on a Saturday we'd have ask and review. Old colonel to come out, and and all different troops would ride by, and I think, man, I need to get out of here and get in that anti-tank platoon, and so we'd ride, and I said, man, I get posted in this saddle. So the troop sergeant, the first sergeant, I said, man, he said, well, it ain't nothing to that posting in the saddle. He said, when the right foot goes down, and I said, I don't know, I just can't do it, and I'd sit up there and bounce around that saddle. He'd pull me out. He'd say, you go over and go behind that tree, and said, don't look very good. And I said, no, I hate that and mess up the troop, and so I heard they needed a man over in the anti-tank. And I asked for a sergeant. I said, I had training in the anti-tank. I said, I hear Captain over there is needing a man, or would like to have a. I said, I don't guess I could get a transfer over there. And he said, I don't know. You might. I'll ask the captain. He said, if it comes from other end, request. He said he might. And so I went over that day. Then I went over and up his tent and found him. He said, yeah, he said, you had training in anti-tank? And I said, sure. And he said, man, I sure do need, I'd like to have you. And I said, well, first sergeant said I might get a transfer if it came from this end, requested, And he said, I'll have you over here in the morning. I said, fine. I went on back, and I was talking. He said, the only way you get out of this line troop is when your heels are turned up, Said, you'll never get out of this outfit. And we were sitting out there with the mess kids eating that evening, and here come a runner over there. And first sergeant said, Bill Hughes, turn in your saddle, your equipment, your transfer to anti-tank.
So you finally did end up in the
Them guys' eyes that big, they couldn't believe it. How in the thunder you done that? And I got out.
Well, so once you got in the mechanized unit, where'd y'all go to then?
Well, we then, of course, in New Guinea and all that, we went up. Usually we'd land on the beach somewhere or come somewhere and go ashore, and maybe we'd have artillery that's attached back on the beach, and we'd be inland in the jungle about 8 miles. And of course we'd leave the jeeps back to base, wherever we landed and started off from, and they'd have a few back there, in the rear, have a movie and all that stuff. But sometimes we had a big regimental band, they'd back there usually in the rear, but then Colonel made Brigadier General, and he got where he'd have everybody up. He'd had the band up, litter bearers and all that. I mean, he just had about everybody, and you could be sick in a hospital or something, and when they left that particular island or something to go to another one, you'd be on that boat. He didn't leave nobody behind.
So you just kind of went from island to island then?
Huh?
Island to island?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And they, what, you just, since you didn't have your horse anymore, I guess you just walked
Yeah,
up and
but
walked the jungle and looking for the
we
Japanese?
left them at New Maya then there. We just left the horses and first went to Townsville, Australia and got answered their equipment and all that. And we would just regular answered it, and then well, we did use the Jeeps on Irving, New Britain. We used them some, and anti-tank guns, and then in the Philippines. But other times, and some of the places in the Philippines, we didn't use them. We was up in the hills, you know.
And I remember you were talking to me about a in the Philippines, some fellow that you had met that knew what the Japanese were doing, and was passing information to you. Is that right? Or no? I thought you told me a little while ago about when you were in the Philippines. There was an underground or a guerrilla group that was that was with you, either with you all or was on the island when you got there and met him, or maybe I misunderstood you.
He was on there. There was a lady, I guess, when they signed him. He'd been underground and in the band in the hills, and he could speak all the different lingos that come in, and so here come a guy that had a couple of eggs one day and wanted to sell them to me for 2 pesos, a peso a piece, and he was standing there, and man, he got on him. I didn't know what he's saying, but he was chewing him out, and that guy just dropped. He handed me them eggs, and man, he took off. And then he told me in English. He said, "Yeah," said, "the Japs took everything you had, kicked you, and said the Americans are your friends, over to help you out, save you, and you want to sell him an egg for a peso a piece." He said, "That ain't right, you know, man." And he'd really get on them. And he handed me them eggs, and he took off. Cause that guy, he probably wasn't a minute off of him, man. He didn't take. He was a.
Was there pretty tough fighting in the Philippines?
Yeah. Yeah, but.
Is there any one particular story or battle that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, the New Guinea Dinamore River campaign in New Guinea. We had the 18th Japanese Army, and Imperial Marines is a lot. They said we defeated, but they broke through the lines. It was all up the river. It wasn't. Broke through one night, about a quarter of a mile below us, 32nd Division, and then we were on up. We just scattered all along the river. Wasn't really in. They broke through. They had machine guns that go into, and they had a bunch of Koreans in the head of them. They didn't even have no weapons, you know. It was kind of a shield, and they just keep coming to finally the guys that, you know, till they're them 30 calibers, they'd lock after so long. We had those old water cooled 30s when we first went over.
Yeah.
You could lay on that trigger on them. You didn't have to worry about it.
But the air-cooled ones would lock up on you?
Yeah, but after so long, they'd lock up on you, box, man, they broke through there below us. 32nd Division, and we had one troop cut off and didn't have any communications. You know, the Japs were always cutting the phone lines, and so they'd sent one bunch down to try to contact them and get alliance, but they didn't. And our platoon was set up around the generals there and that time, and they called half of us out one night. Another troop had been attacked heavy with the Japs, and they sent half of us that was guarding for the general up to help this other troop out. And we went up there, and they'd pulled out. We didn't have any communications, and they called for artillery at 8 Mile on the beach, and they started throwing that artillery on us, and we had 4 guys that got a little shrapnel. They wasn't wounded, and when we got back, then he sent me to try to contact this troop and get the telephone line into them. And he gave me, I had 8 men out of my platoon, and the communications guy, and there's a big Aussie that they've been working these natives. They had soap companies there, you know. Them.
Yeah. So you were with guarding the general for a while, and you just kind of went wherever you were told to go.
Yeah. And we went.
Well, Bill, let me tell you, I told you how quick this half hour would go, and that's what's happened. We've gone for a half an hour now.
Gone?
Yeah. But you sure showed me. I had to, going to island stuff. I know you lost some buddies and stuff, but.
Yeah, I didn't go fast enough.
You really recalled a lot more stuff than most people probably could. So I want to thank you for coming on the program today. Maybe we'll get you back on here sometime when we've got a little bit more time, and you can share some more stories with us. But I want to thank you for coming out today, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to Veteran Voice, and we'll see you next time on Veteran Voice.